Today's Gemara Rosh HaShanah Daf Yomi, learning for the rest of the month, has been generously sponsored by a very close friend of the Daf, Rav Eli, his father, Rav Moshe ben Ruchaim Halevi Zatzal, whose yahrzeit was just the other day on Yudal Cheshvan. The learning of the entire Chabura, which Baruch Hashem keeps on growing by leaps and bounds, should be a tremendous chos ili nishmasa, and as well as chos for his son Rav Eli should continue to be able to learn in good health with the rest of the Chabura, at least until the end of Shas, and hopefully for many, many more cycles, as well as a schoshidah for the rest of our people who Mirchim Shavashich Bakari Yisochem and Devar Shemirim Bas Yis Gittel Shayin Letzah Bas Shana Malka Helia Mordechai Bas Davashendel Es Gittel Bas Davashendel, as well as Refuah Shleim Shmal Yosef Ben Hen Yafred Demelim Vegel Chaim Masar Sham Simon Yizir Zer Bas Knendel Ita Bas Yim Bas Chayisa Yisol Mendel The Perdu Shalei Shal Mas Naomi Bas Shavir Sheikhanish Bit Rivka Bas Vashela Naftali Sim Mechlester B'Soy Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding 4 lines to the bottom of Yud Gimel and Beis. I apologize for the technological glitches in yesterday's year. Baruch Hashem, at least the Gemara came out. Myself didn't, but Baruch Hashem, hopefully everyone was able to handle it either way. So we finished off yesterday with a bit of a debate whether we say this concept of Bila. We had a Mishnah that said that how do you count the grains, the millets, etc. And we said it goes from when it's Hashrasha, when it takes root in the ground. And we had a contradiction because we quoted another Mishnah that said that when we're not sure when something takes root, if it takes root, if we're not sure when something should be considered for Chumas and Ma'isers of vegetation, whether it's this year or that year, we have nothing to do, we said. So what do we have to do? You throw it all into the middle, and then you say Yesh Bila, it's all considered one mixture, and then you can separate. And the question was, so seemingly we have another option. In our case, why do we have to come along and say it goes by the Hashrash, it goes when it takes root? Say each one is a separate time, and it's no big deal. So the Gemara answered that differentiation is that Rav Shimon Shizuri on 6 lines to the bottom said Yesh Bila, whereas the Rabbanan said Ein Bila. And we ended with the statement of Rav Yitzchak Bar Nachmani Amar Shmuel that Allah is Rekivis Ben Kibar Shamar Yisham Yishur Rav Shimon Shizuri seemingly paskening Yesh Bila. Again, this concept of Bila means that we could assume that the mixture is a homogeneous mixture. We can assume that we have a pile of multiple different items, that everything is evenly mixed, and therefore every time I take off something, I'm equally getting part of A and part of B, part from this year and part from that year. Asks the Gemara, Miyamar Shmuel Hachi, does Shmuel really say excuse me, does Shmuel really say that we pass like Rav Shimon Shizuri v'Amar Shmuel la kol ein bila? Shmuel says we don't hold a bila chutz miyayin v'shemen. So what's going on? Answers the Gemara, Ishta mitzeh hada Amar Shmuel. Rav Zira forgot that which Shmuel said, that a kololich acher gemar pi, that everything goes after the gemar pri. So as we turn over to today's Daf Yudalid, the Gemara says Shricha. So we have to pause for a moment and we have to see the top Rashi. Because Rashi points out that what's going on over here is that we have 3 statements of Shmuel. Hani Talas to Shmuel. Number 1, we said Allah Rav Shimon Shizuri, that Yesh Bila, that we assume everything is evenly mixed. Number 2, we said Lakol Ein Bila, that we don't assume it's mixed aside for wine and oil. And then number 3, we said everything goes when the item is complete. So 3 different statements, and the question is, why do we need all 3 statements if they're all touching upon a very similar theme? So the Gemara says, Yusricha, we'll explain why. I would have thought, why are we going with the Shimon Shizuri? Because Yesh Bila, everything's mixed. Kamash Mala, no. Lakol Ein Bila, aside for wine and oil. And now the opposite. I would have thought Havamina Karabanan. Now the Rav Shimon Shizuri, so it's like Kamash Lan Rav Shimon Shizuri. So 1 and 2, we can understand very simply that we need to have Rav Shimon Shizuri. We need to have the Kol Ein Bila aside for wine and oil, because they're sort of a contradiction. So we need to know that we go by both of them. And number 3, if we just said those 2, it's a stira. Kamash Malan, that we go like pri. So why don't we just say that? Just say that we always go by the complete of the item, and we don't need to have the first 2 statements. Then I would think everything goes by the Gemar Pri, even olives and grains, which was yesterday's discussion, which goes by 1/3. Doesn't go by the Gemar when it's complete. Nami. Kamash Malan, Rav Shimon Shizuri, b'mai depolik. They were passing Rav Shimon Shizuri in the case that he argues Not when it comes to zaitim and tvua, but rather when it comes to the grains, the millets, and the other types of items. Says the Gemara of Lashmina Nani Tarti. Why don't we just say these two statements like kol ein bila lamali? Why do you have to tell me there's no bila aside for wine and oil? Answers the Gemara Kamash Landali Yain v'Shemen Yesh bila, and therefore those are the three statements. And it comes out at the end of the day, bit of a unique halacha according to Shmuel that he holds of the concept of bila in the larger sense that we assume things are mixed, but only by wine and oil, which we can understand is more of a liquid type of item. He as well goes with Shmuel that it goes when the item is finished, and as well, in a general sense, he goes we don't say bila, and as well that we go by zitim, by olives and grains when it is grows a third. And that's really the completion of yesterday's Gemara. And now we get back into Zaitim and Tavua, when it comes back to the olives and the grapes. And, we said yesterday, one more time, we said that there's a clear differentiation between fruits and vegetables. And we spoke out that this is very relevant for those here in Eretz Yisrael, for the Shemitah here, that fruit goes when it emerges, the chanata, whereas a vegetable goes by when you pick it, the likita. The Gemara now proves where we get this from. Tani, we learned that in Braisa, we're about 10 lines down. First word in line is Kamash Malan. Rabbi Yosi Aglili Omer. A pasuk that should sound familiar. We had this already. When you gather from your fleshing store, your wine press, to remind everyone this was the source. That when it came to the sukkah, that we're supposed to use refuse and different grown items for your sukkah and your schach. Magarin v'yakem yuchadim shegedelim al mei shana she'avra. Garin and Yaakov, the wine press, the threshing floor, where do those items get nourished from? The rainwaters of last year. I mean, they don't need to have consistent rainwaters. And therefore, Maser L'Shana Avra, it goes Meiser by the previous year. Av Kol Shegedelim Al Mei Shana She'avra, Mes Asrin L'Shana She'avra, it goes by the previous year. Let's just see the contrast. That's going to be fruits. That's going to show us that fruits go by the previous year, meaning when it emerges, because fruits do not need, this is trees, it's very simple to understand, do not need constant water source. Last year's rain is enough. Yatu Yaraka Shekdinim Al Mei Shana Haba. Vegetation, of course, is different. It needs a constant rainfall, constant irrigation. The next year still needs rain. And that's the source, says the Gemara, of the differentiation between differentiation between fruits and vegetables. That when it comes to fruits, it goes by the chanata when it emerges because it requires last year's rainwater. When it comes to the vegetables, it goes by next year's because they need a consistent rain source. Rabbi Kiva learns slightly differently. The threshing floor and the wine press, it needs all types of waters. Last year, it's a little bit of a different point he's honing in on. Vegetables are different. Again, I didn't say that precisely. When it comes to fruits, roiv mayim, it doesn't need, which Roy Mayim refers to the basic water that's out there, meaning rainwater. Whereas when it comes to vegetables, it needs kol Mayim. What's kol? What's all waters? It needs irrigation. It needs you personally to get involved with it. So since by vegetables, it needs more water, it needs man involvement, it needs irrigation, it needs water from next year, it goes by when you pick it. Whereas by the fruit, since last year's water suffices, the rainwater suffices, it goes by the previous year. And says the Gemara, what is the difference between these two ways of learning? We had two drashas, Rabbi Yossi Glili and Rav Akiva, both teaching me this basic idea that fruit goes by when it grows and vegetables go by when it's picked. What is the nuance of a difference between the two drashas? Amar Avavua betilim asrisin. These teeny little onions, the Inu onions, Upula Mitzri, and these Egyptian beans, Ikebe Nayu. Why? The Tanan, we learned today Mishnah. B'tzalam Asrisin Upula Mitzri, Shemona Me'amayim Shloishim Yom Levnei Rosh HaShanah. You don't water them for 30 days prior to Rosh HaShanah of Shemitah. Mis'asrin L'sha'avar last year, Umutarim B'shvias, and they're allowed to be consumed on Shvius. And that is the difference between Rav Yossi Glili and the Kiva. And to explain very simply is that Rav Yossi Aglili is going to agree with this din. Because Rav Yossi Aglili honed in on when did the rain come from, last year or next year. So in this case, since you didn't water it for 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, that means it's clearly last year. And therefore, it's going to have a unique case of a vegetable, of an onion, that's going to go by last year and not go by when you pick it because you stopped watering it. Meaning usually Rav Yossi Aglili taught us that vegetables need to be watered into this year. And that's why it goes by the likita, by the picking. But if you have a vegetable that will grow without the new water, Rav Yossi Aglili will agree that it goes by last year. Whereas according to Rav Akiva, it has nothing to do with that. According to Rav Akiva, it goes by ostensibly what type of item is it? Is it an item that needs kol mayim or roiv mayim? Is it an item that needs rainwater or even irrigation water? And therefore these vegetables, they need irrigation water. You just didn't give it to them. And therefore, according to Rav Akiva, these onions he would not agree with this brisa. These onions would go by the next year. And that's going to be the difference between Rav Akiva and Rav Yossi Aglili. And now we get back into the Mishnah, the next case. 7 lines from the bottom. We had a few days on Tishrei, all the different cases of Tishrei, Arla, Natia, Yerakais, Meisers, etc. And now we get to the next Rosh HaShanah in the Mishnah, the last Rosh HaShanah in the Mishnah. Echad B'Shvat, Machlokes between Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai said the first of Shvat, Beis Hillel said 2 B'Shvat, as we all know, which is Rosh HaShanah Le'ilon. Explains the Gemara, my time, what is the reason that it goes by Shvat? Since most of the rainwater fell, and even though most of the rainwater fell, still most of the winter season didn't come. An interesting statement. Again, most of the rainwater fell by Tu B'Shvat, but the winter season hasn't finished. Says the Gemara, my Kamar, what exactly are you saying? Answers the Gemara, this is what it means. Even though there's still more of the winter season, still, since the rain basically has passed by Tu B'Shvat, therefore now, on Shvat, now it is the new year. So we're holding in on a chiddush, a novelty, that even though when Shvat comes, even though when Shvat comes, it's still the winter, but since most rainwater fell, it's going to be called the new year. Tan Rabbanan, says the Gemara, 2 lines from the bottom. Mais Rabbi Kiva shall get Esrog Becha B'Shvat. Rabbi Kiva picked an Esrog on the first of Shvat, and Agbo Shnei Isurim. And he had his Esrog, and he said there's 2 types of Meisers in this Esrog. Very interesting as we move over to the base. Echa Kedivri Beis Shammai, Vecha Kedivri Beis Hillel. He seemingly was Machmir. And he said that this Esrog is called part of this year and part of that year. Because Beis Shammai says Rosh HaShanah, Rosh Shvat, Beis Hillel says Tu B'Shvat. So he was right in the middle. So Rav Akiva was machmir for both. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nagba. No, it wasn't Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Ella minig Rav Gamliel, Rav Elazar nagba. What did Rav Akiva do? He did like Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar. What's Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar? The Tanan, as we learned, 4 lines from the top. Yudalim in the base. Esrog shavel ilam begimel drachim. An esrog is like a tree in 3 ways. Uliyarik b'derech echad, and like a vegetable in 1 way. Shavel ilam begimel drachim. It's like a tree in 3 ways. Allah arla, uliravai, ulishvius. That with regard to Arla, the first 3 years you can't eat it. The Ravai in the 4th year in Yerushalayim. Shavias, the 7th year you can't use it. It's like a tree. Like we spoke about the whole first part of today's year. Vegetables go by when you pick them. Divrei Rav Gamliel, that's Rav Gamliel. Rav Elazar Omer, no. Esek shavel ilan bechol davar. It's 100% like a tree, meaning, and what's the fine nuance? It doesn't go by when you pick it, it goes by when it blossoms like a fruit tree. And therefore, Rav Akiva was machmer like Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, that even though the chanata, the blossoming was in last year, and the picking was in this year, therefore he took both chumras and he assumed it's meiser like both years, like that last year and like the coming year, because it blossomed in that year and it was picked in this year. That is, so either Rav Akiva did like Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, Rosh HaShanah 2 B'Shvat stringency, or he did like Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, stringency including both the blossoming and the picking. And I'm sure many people have been bothered. What in the world does that top line of our Gemara mean? He did like Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. We don't find such a thing. Ask the Gemara. Do you do such a thing? Is that a good practice to like 2 stringencies? We pass like Beis Hillel. You want to do like Beis Shammai? No problem. You also can do like Beis Hillel. Psak halacha, Beis Hillel. You want to do Beis Shammai? It's fine. Or you can obviously do like Beis Hillel. However, the Mishnah continues, the Brisa continues, Meikule Beis Shammai, Meikule Beis Hillel. If you take both kulas, and of course, unfortunately, all too many people, you don't have a Rav. I take the kula of this Rav, and the kula of that Rav, and the kula of this one. You can't do that. Rasha, Mechumre Beis Shammai, Mechumre Beis Hillel. Allah HaKazav Aimer. If you take everyone's chumras, then you're just a fool. Haksil b'choshech hoylech. You are the ksil, you are the fool walking in the darkness. Says the Gemara, Rav Akiva's a fool. What's going on over here? You just told me in a brayso we shouldn't do like both chumras, so Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. If you do like their kulas, that's dreadful. You're a Rasha. But if you do like their chumras, you're a ksil, you're a fool. So why would Rav Akiva do that? Ella explains the Gemara. You have to either go like Beis Shammai all the way. So what is going on with Rabbi Akiva? Answers the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva gamrei yistabikle. Rabbi Akiva wasn't sure about the Gemara. V'lo yada, he didn't know. He didn't remember which shita was which. So it wasn't that he was trying to take both chumras, he just didn't remember. Because he didn't remember misafik, that's why he went with both opinions, because he wanted to make sure he got Beis Hillel, because he didn't remember which one was Beis Hillel. And that, of course, you could do. You don't remember which way to go, you could take all the chumras, not a big deal. Now we go into the braysa that we just quoted. Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda Aimer Lo Minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel Naguba El Minig Rav Gimli Rav Eliezer Naguba. Like we just quoted the braysa that Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda says no. Rav Akiva was being machmer for Rav Elazar and Rav Gamliel. Says the Gemara Becha B'Shvat Beis Shammai Naguba, that he was in the first of Shvat, he was noig like Beis Shammai. What's going on over here? You're telling me it's like Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, but if it's the first of Shvat, Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, that's Beis Shammai. We don't basket like Beis Shammai. So why is Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar seemingly working within the confines of Beis Shammai? Amar Rav Chanina v'tem Rav Chananya hacha be'esrog. It's a different case. This is really how we explained it originally because it's easier to understand. Esrog shechantoi peiros of koidim tesvav. The peiros blossomed. The fruit of the esrog came out before Tu B'Shvat. The Edach Shvat. The fruit came out before the previous Tu B'Shvat. So it wasn't that they were going with Rosh Chodesh Shvat like Beis Shammai. It was that the fruit blossomed after the previous Tu B'Shvat, before this Tu B'Shvat. And that was the Chumrah, because it blossomed before the previous Tu B'Shvat, so maybe it goes by the previous year due to the blossoming, but I am picking it this year, so maybe it goes by the picking. So Rav Yehuda is answering, he went with Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, meaning both by the picking and by the blossoming. Answer number one. And the Gemara now explains, and really the case could have been earlier. You're right, it didn't have to be on Rosh Chodesh Shvat, because it has nothing to do with Rosh Chodesh Shvat, because it really had to be, it was before the previous Tu B'Shvat. That was just a story. And Ravina Amar says another answer. Korach v'tani. No, you got to read it all together, and we'll conclude with this. It wasn't on the first Shvat. That wasn't the story. Meaning, Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda argues. Rav Akiva had a story. He did like two chumras. Says Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda, it's not that he did like Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. That wasn't the story. Elo tesva b'Shvat. It's a different story. It was on Tu B'Shvat. V'lai minig Beis Shammai Beis Hillel nagba. He wasn't doing like Beis Shammai Beis Hillel. Elo minig Rav Gamliel Rav Elazar nagba. He's doing like Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar, and that's what Rav Yosef Rav Yehuda is coming to teach us. He's not teaching us that within the story, like you said before, that was on Rosh Chodesh Shvat. It was a different story. It was Tu B'Shvat, and he's doing like the chumras of Rav Gamliel and Rav Elazar. We'll pick it up over here as the Gemara now is going to go all the way into the next Amud, and we'll see everyone tomorrow. Amir Hashem.